Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Al Mina, the concept author of Face Economics, the utilization of the social media platform in economic development worldwide. Thank you for joining me and for your continued support. I truly do appreciate your time trying to, evaluate what are the things that are evolving in the new world marketplaces via the utilization of the social media platform. So my background is in economic development. I've also conducted various forms of, capacity building and institutional development activities in frontier and emerging markets of Central and Eastern Europe. Also, been trained in various forms of international trade and foreign, policy type of engagements. So with that said, my platform in itself is, was created to basically evaluate, trends in economic development using the social media platform and how, these trends are evolving via the platform itself. So with this said, I thought I kind of, diversify a little and talk about the case of a Hispanic former journalist and prisoner of war who died in captivity in Ukraine this year, last January, and basically try to understand the grief that his family are having, are having to deal with now, that their son and their husband and their father's gone, for basically sharing his views online on his social media platform, which most of the things that he shared with the people on his platform were already readily available material that he was just basically piggybacking off of. It's not like he got access to classified information and he, shared it on his social media platform and, from the Ukrainian government. I mean, everything that he was sharing was the same stuff that everybody else had, access to. He just basically reviewed the management style and operational, activities of the Ukrainian government that was already shared online. So he was put in jail for that, and he was accused to be operating as, an operative for, I guess, the other side, which still haven't yet been proven, or he was basically found not even associated with any, people from the Russian government. So I mean, it's just way too much question marks revolving this case. And I thought I'd, share the most recent interview with Mr. Gonzalo Lira's father, Mr. Gonzalo Lira Sr., who is also an American citizen, who is currently living in South America. And all he's basically wanted to, do initially was to get his son out of Ukraine. Okay, and he had requested assistance from, the U.S. government and everybody else that he thought would be able to support his initiative, given that the only reason that Mr. Gonzalo Lira, his son, was in Ukraine was because he posted, or why he was detained in Ukraine, I would say, was because he posted, content that was already readily available online. It's not like he made up those material. Okay, folks. So as I said, his father, Gonzalo Lira's father, is trying to recover the remains of his son, as well as his wife. Both of them were kind of, working together to recover the remains of their loved one, and had requested for an independent autopsy that was not even, honored by the Ukrainian government, um, or anybody that had the power and authority to, conduct an autopsy on a foreigner, an American citizen in Ukraine. Instead, what they did was they cremated his body. So um, it's almost impossible now. There's no way to do any form of independent study on a cremated body. Um, and yet, even till to this day, he died a month ago. Okay. And till to this day, they still don't have the remains of their loved one, because according to Mr. Gonzalo Lira Sr., his son is still in Ukraine. So, I mean, I'm just so speechless regarding this whole case, because there's so many question marks revolving it. Okay, I mean, really strange, very strange case. I mean, I've read and paid attention to other cases, regarding prisoners of wars and foreigners who had been, um, you know, imprisoned in foreign countries, even the world countries that we fight against. I've just never heard of something like this before. Anyway, I'll play the interview. It's quite lengthy, so pause the video or forward it or listen to it on a later date when you have enough time to fully appreciate the content of the video. And just kind of opine and try to evaluate the overall situation, because it's a really, really strange case. It's probably one of the strangest cases I've ever come across. Anyway, I'll play the video now and then I'll talk further afterwards. Okay, let's see here.
Mr. Lira, first of all, condolences on the death of your son. I know this is something that is very difficult to have to navigate, but I also very much appreciate your taking the time to talk to us so we can bring some more journalistic attention to what has happened here.
Thank you so much, Glenn. It's my pleasure being with you. And my intention for this interview is that I wish the world would become aware of what happened to my son. My son was assassinated.
Let's get into it step by step, just so that people can kind of follow along, because there's some people who don't know. So I want to just kind of lay the foundation for everything. I have seen, as I've been talking about this case, and other people have been talking about this case, some of the most rabid supporters of Ukraine who peddle disinformation all the time, actually calling into doubt whether or not your son even died in a Ukrainian prison, whether he's still in a Ukrainian prison, whether he's still alive. How did you find out about the death of your son, and what is it that you learned about the circumstances of his death when you were told that this has happened?
Well, the process was very simple. Finally, my son arrived into a hospital on January the 4th because he had double pneumonia, he had pneumothorax, and he had a heavy case, an acute case of edema. He could not breathe. He would lose consciousness if he spoke for more than 2 minutes. And this is a small note that he wrote to his sister, my daughter. Now, once he arrived in that hospital, the following week, he died. How do we know? The director of this Ukrainian hospital in the city of Kharkiv called the U.S. Embassy and informed them that my son Gonzalo had died. The officials from the U.S. Embassy called my daughter and told her about my son's death. And this was on January the 12th. And that's how I heard of my son's death in a hospital sent by the jailers that he had been for 8 months incommunicado in the city of Kharkiv. My son did not have an attorney other than a court-appointed attorney that did not speak any English. And my son's charges were that he was a Russian propagandist, because as a blogger reporter, he had over 300 subscribers in the various websites that he had. And he told them the reasons for Russia invading Ukraine. He explained the why. And he ventured in his analysis that Ukraine would never win a war against Russia, no matter what help they received from the USA or the NATO countries.
Right, and just to be clear, your son was a citizen both of Chile and the United States, so he was an American citizen at the time that he was expressing these views. Is that?
If I may,
go ahead.
Give you some details.
Yeah.
Gonzalo was born in Burbank, in the city of Los Angeles, in 1968, while I was doing my postgraduate work in economics. He was born in the USA, and he was brought up in the USA up until he was 11 years old. At that time, we moved to Santiago, Chile, where he finished his high school in Santiago to go back to the USA to Dartmouth College in New Hampshire. After graduating from Dartmouth, he stayed in the USA. He published a book called Counterparts, published by Putnam Editorial in New York, and stayed in the USA for many years. He was an American citizen. There is no doubt about it. Now, while he came to Chile as a son of a Chilean, as an aside, Glenn, at the beginning he was a wetback because his papers, his tourist papers, expired. His and his daughter, his sister. So we had to make all arrangements, and obviously they gave him the Chilean nationality, and that's why he had dual nationality.
Right. So,
but he was born in the
United States. Yeah. So and obviously anyone born in the United States receives automatic lifelong citizenship, an American passport, and all of that, and the full rights of all American citizens under the Constitution. Now, he was 55 years old when he died, which obviously is very young, especially to die of pneumonia. Usually a 55-year-old man in generally good health will be able to combat pneumonia if it's treated properly with just the basic minimum treatment. Did your son have any serious or chronic health problems before his problems in Ukraine with the law began?
My son had a mild case of heart disease, the coronary arteries. He never had a heart stroke, by the way. When he was detained on May the 1st, Gonzalo was in totally normal health. He was physically alert. He had never been sick in a hospital. And Gonzalo, again, let me repeat, he was in excellent health. Now, he was a heavy smoker, though, but he had no case of any severe illness.
Now, when you were told when your daughter was told, when Gonzalo's brother, your daughter, was told by the U.S. Embassy that the hospital had told them that your son had died. After that, at any point, did anyone provide anything in writing to you? Did you ever learn any more information from the United States consulate about the circumstances of his death?
No, none whatsoever. As a matter of fact, if I may explain, since day one, when my son was detained, according to the embassy protocol around the world, an official of the embassy has to go and speak to the detained American citizen in a country overseas immediately, offering him legal assistance immediately, offering them communication with the family. None of those things the U.S. Embassy did, because my son was detained, Glenn, due to Biden's giving the green light. I am not the first one to say it in these words. Someone else said it before. Senile Biden gave the green light to dictator Zelensky to detain my son. And let me tell you why. My son was detained the first time by the SBO, which is the local Gestapo, in the year 22. On April the 5th through April the 22nd, that full week, he was detained. Then released without any legal charge, no charges on him. But of course, those savages stole all his electronic equipment, stole money from him, and he came back to an apartment that had been ransacked. He recovered all of his equipment and continued with the same language, criticizing bloody, sinister dictator Zelensky and the way the war was being carried out, venturing on March 22nd, a month after the invasion, that Ukraine would never win a war against Russia, that all of the economic sanctions would backfire in the USA, and it would hurt the economies of Europe, and it would hurt the economy of the USA. If you see the economic numbers for Russia, they have been growing during the war. Now, he continued the same language, as I said before, criticizing the dictator Zelensky in Ukraine. But hear me out on this one. After a full year, after being detained and released those 7 days, Gonzalo, for the first time, put a video criticizing senile Biden, as he referred to President Biden, and stupid Kamala Harris, as he referred to the vice president, because he said, I have never seen a woman so stupid as Kamala Harris. He went on to criticize Biden on the 27th of April, the year 2023. 4 days later, Gonzalo is detained by machine gun soldiers in mass. At least 12 of them went to his apartment to break down practically the door of his apartment, and they detained him 4 days after he criticized for the first time senile Biden.
Right. I think it's worth emphasizing there, by the way, that as an American citizen, obviously he has the absolute right to criticize the president and the vice president in as harsh of terms as he wants. And there's plenty of other people saying what he said about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But I remember, as somebody who's been covering this war, watching his reports from Ukraine, his YouTube reports and others, and was amazed at the courage that it took after he was detained at the start of the war, seeing how dissidents were being treated in Ukraine, to continue to speak out so boldly, so forcefully. Now, let me just, I'm sure I know you've seen this before, but for those people who haven't, he posted a video on July 31st, 2023, and it's amazing because the criticisms that you have been explaining that he voiced, which I remember at the time, all basically turned out to be true. That Ukraine had no chance to win, that it would end up harming the European and American economy while bolstering the Russian economy. But here in July, the last day of July 2023, he basically posted a video knowing that if he wasn't saved by the US government, if people didn't intervene to get him free and to get him out of that country, he knew exactly what would happen, which was that he would end up being killed in prison. So let's just watch this video for those who haven't seen it, then I want to hear your reaction to it.
My case originally started as a free speech issue. But because of the SBU and the inherent corruption of the SBU and the criminal justice system in Ukraine, I will definitely be sent to a prison labor camp where I will most certainly die. And so I decided that the smart thing was take my chances in terms of getting across the border.
I should have warned you about that. I know how hard that is to, when you're going through grief, to see a video of the person you lost. Believe me, I understand. But I think it's very important for people to have heard, because I just want to make sure that nobody thinks that the American government and the Biden administration wasn't aware of his case. A lot of us were talking about it at the time. This video circulated everywhere. And so what I want to know from you is, was there any moment, obviously he's asking for help there, when his family, when you or anybody else asked the United States government to intervene in any way in order to help him? And are you aware of any efforts that the consulate made to ensure that his rights were being protected?
I sent many letters to embassy officials, including Ambassador Blinken. I explained to them the fact that my son was a US citizen and they had not done a thing to help him out. They didn't even provide an attorney. The defense attorney that Gonzalo had was appointed by the court, Glenn. Can you believe that? The court of Ukraine appointed the defense attorney, and hear me, who didn't speak any English. How the hell could he communicate with my son? They used a translator. I had communication with this man, Victor Serkovny, through WhatsApp with the translator, in the middle, which doesn't translate exactly, how, the intention and the meaning of the words. I couldn't speak to the man. Now, the U.S. Embassy's behavior was unbelievable. I mean, they wanted Gonzalo to die. And I was always asking myself before falling asleep, was my son that important? He had 300 and some subscribers. He had hundreds of thousands of viewers. But had he become that important that merit to detain him? I mean, it's outrageous. What have I done so far since my poor son died? I have placed in the Secretary of State Department the Freedom of Information Act. I want to know all correspondence, documents between Mr. Blinken, Victoria Nuland, and the Lady Ambassador Brink of the USA in Ukraine that transpired between January the 1st of the year 22 concerning my son Gonzalo. I want to know all communication exchanges between that area and the government of Ukraine or any official of the Ukrainian government, because what they did to my son is an assassination. My son did not have any criminal charges. My son used the power of freedom of speech. I even marched in the year 1965, UC Berkeley, Mario Savio, free speech movement, the anti-war, the anti-Vietnam War. I marched in those years, Glenn. I was studying at that time in the USA. I lived many years in the USA, and I cannot condone this terrible government that the USA has, that has no place in the White House. We had never had a worse government than this one. This man, Biden, is responsible for my son's assassination because the judgment, the trial never came. They arrested him. He had been in jail for 8 months without a trial. And why? I read in different places in Ukraine that many of the political opposition to Zelensky, they would be detained by the SBU, exactly as my son was detained. And they would keep them in jail for months, because what were they doing? Their intention was to make them ill and have them die of natural causes. That is what they did to my son Gonzalo Lira, those criminal dictator that the USA is maintaining. How much money is Zelensky getting from the 115 billion that we have accounted so far? How much has plowed into his pocket? And how much is Hunter Biden getting?
You know, I think one of the important things to note here is that obviously the United States government has influence with most countries, probably more than any country. It has the most influence in Ukraine, given the fact that the Ukrainians are completely dependent on the largesse of the American government to pay for their war, to prop them up. We're going to pay for the reconstruction of Ukraine once this war is done and once we've helped destroy it. And had the Biden administration even lifted a finger in defense of your son, he would have obviously been released from prison without having been convicted of a crime. And certainly they would not have been allowed to cause him to die in the way that he did. Just to be clear, I think I asked this before, but I just want to be very clear about this. Since the death of your son, and there's obviously been a lot of media attention, not as much as there deserves to be, but a good amount on the fact that this happened, has anyone from the Biden administration or anywhere in the U.S. government reached out in any way to you or to your family to communicate with you, to give you information, to give you condolences or consolation, something that the American government typically does for one of their own citizens ending up in a situation like this? Have you heard from them in any way?
None whatsoever. None whatsoever. More so, all they did was to intervene in the shipping of my son's urn because he was cremated. His former wife, Maria, who is an Ukrainian lady, and that's why he was living in Ukraine since the year 2016. And he had 2 sons, 10-year-old girl and an 8-year-old boy. My 2 grandsons are living in Ukraine, and that's why my son was in Ukraine since the year 2016. Well, the U.S. Embassy hasn't done a thing other than they intervened in the shipping of his urn to Santiago, Chile, because I asked specifically that I do not want that urn to go to the USA, never to touch American soil after what the USA has done to my son.
The last question I have for you is, I'm sorry. I know it's very emotional. This is very new. I mean, this is not like it happened a year ago or many months ago. It's an extremely recent thing. So I think everyone understands the fact that you are quite pained and emotional about it. Obviously.
Let me
go ahead.
I'm sorry. The urn, my son died on January the 11th. Today is February the 9th. It's almost a month now. The urn is still in Kiev. the urn is supposed to be sent to the Chilean embassy in Poland, in Warsaw, because they do not have, the Chileans, an embassy in Ukraine. They are supposed to fly that urn to the embassy in Warsaw, Poland, and from there to Santiago. And it's been almost a month, and my son's urn is still in Kiev. I mean, I heard rumors, that they didn't want to hand his body because Maria, his wife, she wanted another autopsy, which would definitely specify that he was tortured.
But they cremated him. They cremated him, rendering that impossible. That autopsy impossible, obviously. All right, let me just ask the last question because
the autopsy.
Sorry, we're running out of time, so I just want to make sure I ask this.
Yeah.
You described the FOIA request that you've submitted. I don't know if you have legal counsel for that or not, but are you considering legal action as well against either the Ukrainian government or the American government? And if so, do you have some kind of a defense fund or anything else where anybody who is angry about what has happened here and who wants to help can do so?
Fortunately, money is not my problem. I will demand sue the government of Ukraine. I'm doing the preliminary stages of a full demand by doing the Freedom of Information Act. I want to know exactly the information that transpired between the State Department and the government of Ukraine and the jailers of my son from January the 1st of the year 22 onwards. I want to get that information first because my son's death is going to be cleared up. I want the world to know that they did not only assassinated my son, they assassinated the First Amendment of the US Constitution, the freedom of information, the freedom of speech. I have the right to give my opinion. Well, and my son was assassinated because he gave his opinion.
Yeah, I think the complete silence and inaction on the part of the U.S. government, not just now, but when he was detained and when he was warning that he was going to die in prison if he wasn't saved, is one of the most disgraceful things I've seen as part of a war that itself is completely disgraceful. But I'm so happy, though I know it's difficult at this time for you to be speaking out so vocally to ensure that your son's death, that will have some accountability. We're obviously going to continue to pursue this story until its very end, and we really appreciate your taking the time to come on and talk to us about this. Hopefully this will bring even more attention to what was done here. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and say one last thing, feel free, and then we can conclude, but go ahead.
Thank you, Glenn, once again for the opportunity you've given me. I just wanted to clear one point.
Go ahead. Gonzalo
was detained May the 1st. He became ill according to his own note, which is physically in internet, okay? The note that he wrote to his sister. He became ill mid-October. So for almost 5 months that he was detained, he was in good health. Finally, they succeeded. From mid-October onward, they made him ill. I just wanted to get that point clear. He was in good health for the first 5 months of his detainment.
Yeah, you can see in this video, obviously it's not always easy to judge a person's health in a video from a distance, but he looks perfectly active and healthy. His work output was always very prolific. He obviously had a lot of energy. And so to just suddenly deteriorate that way and die, like I said, at 55 of an pneumonia, raises suspicions, to say the least, in the eyes of any reasonable person. Mr. Lira, thank you one more time. I'm sure we will be talking again. I hope so, as you continue to pursue justice for your son. Thank you very much.
It's been my great pleasure seeing you once again, as I said before, Glenn. And I hope we won't lose each other, okay?
I promise you we will not.
Available for anything you wish.
I promise you we will not. We will definitely continue to pursue this story. Have a good evening. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Okay, folks. So now we understand, the basic background regarding Mr. Gonzalo Lira's case. As everybody's basically scratching their heads, why there's so many question marks regarding this case. Really strange that for someone to share their review, opinion, and overall journalistic background on their platform to be dealt the way that Mr. Gonzalo Lira was dealt with. As someone who have served my government, this really is something that troubles me, because we need to stand for democracy. We need to stand for human rights and the rule of law, and everything and anything that we hold of value to us as Americans. I've decided to run for the U.S. Senate precisely to help preserve democracy and encourage our partners abroad to also value democracy. And the way that we encourage them is by supporting them and, providing an economic and diplomatic, platform for them to advance their engagement and the preservation of democracy in their country. We went to war over, democracy to help, other people overseas to preserve their democracy. And when I hear cases like this, it makes me wonder, how much are we being, informed of the overall agenda regarding the preservation of democracy abroad. If an American citizen is told our government that he's being tortured and extorted and his freedom of speech is violated and that he will not survive in a country that he knows is going to be, tortured in, I would think that the American public and our government would, go up in arms and say that won't happen. That's not something that we would stand for as Americans. Okay, folks. It's a very strange case. Extremely, troubling in my opinion. I'm glad that Glenn Greenwald have decided to talk to Mr. Gonzalo Lira Sr. and continue to report this case, because I've read cases where prisoners of war, not necessarily just American prisoners of war, but prisoners of war in general, have been treated much better than Mr. Gonzalo was treated. And all he did was basically share his opinion and review on his social media platform. I've heard prisoners of wars that massacred communities and villages, and they weren't treated anywhere near the way Mr. Gonzalo and his family's been treated. So I'm extremely concerned regarding this. I've served my government, as I've mentioned. I've run for the U.S. Senate. I continue to support our initiatives worldwide to help our partners develop their economic capacity and build their democratic agenda as a country. So this is troubling, extremely troubling for me. I mean, my life had been, basically dedicated to, human rights, the preservation of democracy, lifting all boats economically, building, friendships diplomatically abroad. I mean, I've taken on jobs in the government, in the US government, that paid me $200 a month, and I've accepted that job because I thought I was, helping preserve democracy and help our partners build their capacity. Um, but when a case like this, becomes so, I it just so tragic in so many levels. Um, I just don't even know how it is even possible in today's, day and age. It's the year 2024, and everybody's on social media nowadays. And yet, an American citizen who had requested assistance from his government wasn't afforded that assistance, and even his own family, right? His family who had knocked on the U.S. government's door and then requested, for the government to intervene. It's like they completely ignored his requests. I, I mean, I, I seriously don't understand that. I mean, there are less powerful countries that, would, basically move mountains to help preserve the life of their citizen. And us as Americans and our government, who right now is, somewhat respected, and has a lot of, bargaining power, decided not to preserve the life of an American citizen. So, who just basically posted his thoughts and views and reviewing a government and their pre-existing condition on his social media platform. Anyway, thank you guys for listening and your continued support. I appreciate you, trying to make sense out of this whole case regarding Mr. Gonzalo Lira, because not only was he silenced, it seems like he's being erased. His presence and his overall, existence being erased for basically sharing his thoughts on his social media platform. I mean, talk about injustice. I mean, talk about the violation of freedom of speech. Talk about the violation of democracy and human rights. Come on, I just it's one of those things, right? I've seen a lot of crap in this world. I've seen and I've experienced tons of crap in my own life. And while I navigate through this, convoluted and unpredictable world. But his case, Mr. Gonzalo Lira's case, is definitely one of the strangest ones I've come across so far. You know, I can understand if he had taken on arms and exterminated someone that he didn't believe or valued or consider as a human being, but he didn't do that. He just basically shared his opinion on his social media platform. Anyway, thank you folks for your time. Looking forward to connecting with you again. Have a great rest of the week.